Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very short live stream. Just waiting for Charlie to join us in here. If you are here, let me know in the chat. We've got, of course, a bunch of you here. I think we've got a few folks in here right now. Just let me know that you're here. And we will get started in just a few minutes. Again, this will be part of an update. In fact, our final Flashback Friday episode of A Productive Conversation as we are shifting towards a, shall we say, more realistic podcast schedule. I see Gloria Jean here. I see Sarah here. Thanks, Sarah, for joining us. Like I said, we're just waiting on Charlie to get into the green room. And then once he's here, we'll just jump right in. We got about a half an hour. If you've got questions, Jackie, good to see you. If you've got questions that you want to ask Charlie, then put them in the chat and I can see it from here so we can make sure that we get some of those questions answered. And yeah, basically the last time that we had Charlie on the show, and here we go. I'm going to bring Charlie in. Charlie can see me in the green room. I don't know if he can hear me, but we're going to bring him in right now. Charlie!
Mike, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. Now, we are on a live stream for the members of my Time Crafting Trust community. So, good to see you. And thank you so much for taking the time. We are going to be recording this as kind of an update. You are the final Flashback Friday episode that we were doing of the podcast. And then we're just going back to a regular weekly because data was analyzed and it didn't seem like the twice weekly podcast was really working for me. But it's good to see you. It's been how long has it been since we actually caught up?
Man, it's been a minute. Actually, like 2 weeks ago. But so before you invited me to this, I was like, what is Mike up to these days? It's been forever. And I'm not, no shade. Like, can people hear us right now?
Oh, yeah. They can totally hear us.
So you all, if you've been on the path, and I'm not sure if this has come up with other guests, it's like, we authors and sort of thought leaders and rogues like us, like we just get in like a tunnel and we just do things for a while. Then you like come up for air and you're like, oh, there are all these people I really care about that, like, you just haven't had that sort of bandwidth or that being like, oh yeah, I actually need to talk to people.
It's funny. I have a recurring task in Todoist that says reach out to someone you haven't connected with in a long time. And that's a great task to have in there. And I have it, like, I think recurring every week, but it's the list of the people that I have to mentally think of, like, who haven't I talked to in a while? And again, as we get older, time dilation, right? Like, how long has it been? It's probably been like a year easily since we probably chatted easily.
It's been that way. And I still think, I don't know, people get on my head about it a lot, but I still think we're still a part of, like, in the COVID time dilation as well, where like our sense of time has been fundamentally altered. And so it's like, oh yeah, I remember seeing Mike. It was in Portland. And you're like, oh crap, that was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, let me blow you away with this. My daughter is in Montreal at university now.
Oh, the dork reader's daughter.
Yes, the dork reader's daughter. For those that don't know, all right. So this is the great thing about, because we're gonna muck around for this final Flashback Friday. It's whatever it is. I mean, we're gonna get an update on what you've been doing since we last spoke. But the story, and I think we've shared this story a couple of times on the podcast, but just as a bit of a refresher. So when Charlie and I have done, we've known each other almost 15 years now, probably.
Yeah,
thereabouts.
It's been a while, yeah.
And so we presented at a conference called Think Better, Live Better. And this would have been the one in San Diego, I think, right? One of the ones in San Diego.
This was the one in Austin.
Oh, it was the one in Austin. You're right. And so we did a joint workshop together. And I said that when I stepped down from my role at Costco as one of the managers, I became a door greeter. But I said it so quickly. Charlie goes, Charles, dork reader? You're a dork reader? And I'm like, no. And then that's just been the thing. Yes. So I'm my job was, I guess, to count the dorks that would arrive in the store and then look at the anyway.
Well, look, it takes one to know one, so you're like the perfect fit for it.
Fair.
So the part they also doesn't know that it was a part-time comedy bit too,
yes,
right? For that particular thing. So
I'm
sure they know about your comedy background. So it's like, all right, it's a productivity jam and a comedy bit at the same time.
Exactly. So basically, the last time that we had you, the interview that you're going to hear in just a few minutes here is when we had you on to talk about the book that you have in the background, a video, and I'm holding in my hands right now, Start Finishing. So, which I had the privilege, and again, thank you for having me contribute to this book in some small way. But you've had other things going on. We talked about the app that you have, and it's still running.
Still running. Yep.
Still running.
Yep.
And then Team Habits, which I can see behind you right now, which we have not talked about. So what has been going on in your part of the world and in your world since Start Finishing? And also, like, how has Team Habits been going for you? Because there seems to be a real pull. Like David Allen did a book on team getting things done. That was about a year ago. And so what's that journey been like for you?
Yeah, so since Start Finishing, we have launched a community that's morphed into what we're doing on Substack now. And so Productive Flourishing used to be on WordPress and all that kind of whatnot. We since moved to Substack, and that's the primary place to find us, although it's just Productive Flourishing. So most people don't know or care about the insider baseball there.
Yeah.
But we also launched the app Momentum
Mm-hmm.
that is still going and growing. And really what I think Momentum helps people do is do a lot of that chunking and sequencing that makes it so hard to do on a lot of apps that are essentially glorified to-do lists, right? Where most of the problems we have is actually figuring out how to get projects done.
Yeah.
So that's what Momentum really helps with, and also takes a lot of the stupid meta work and fiddling out of productivity apps, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was walking through a client that was using an app, and I was getting so pissed because he wasn't using ours for different reasons. And I was like, why is it so hard to do basic stuff in this? Like,
yeah, it's fun. I was just talking to my friend Phil Simon about the Todoist versus other apps conundrum. And it's like there's so many out there, which you have definitely experienced, the concept of like their apps are hard and that kind of thing. But we were talking about the distinction between like an app like Todoist and say one like ClickUp or Notion or whatever. And my argument was once you have more than one person in there, it's the nuance that can kind of throw everything out of whack, because when you're working on your own in an app, it's yours. Like you can do your own labels and tags. But once you invite just another person in, whether it's, your partner or, an assistant, or those elements have to be taken into account. And that's where the fraying can start to happen. Have you experienced that with?
Yeah, well, and not to, I want to be careful not to sound like I'm trying to sell Momentum. It's a great app, y'all, but use whatever you're going to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I hear you, and just simple things like in Asana, which is the tool that I recommend for a lot of teammates. Like, why is it so hard to defer something by a week?
Yeah.
Right? That's all I want. Defer it by a week. I shouldn't have to fiddle with dates and then change things. Like, I should just be able to hit a button. And some of those things are what we put into Momentum. And so it's hard to talk about people on the outside because they're used to so much of the meta work.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just another meta worky app. I'm like, no, like if you just get to archive a project and the whole project gets archived and you don't have these random children tasks that are all over the place, like there's small things like that I just think that a lot of these companies that have way more funding money than I do should be able to solve way better.
Yeah.
And so I'm still, I want it, like, sure, I want a lot of customers for Momentum, but really what I wanted to do is be like the Tesla of things, and that it puts pressure on other apps to do better, right? And if those other apps win because they're doing better, great, because like we should not have so much meta work just to get some basic work done.
Yeah. Yeah. Team Habits, we haven't had a chance to talk about that much. And by the way, if you're all the premium members that are in this group right now that are watching, if you have any questions for Charlie that you want to throw in there, we can throw them into the update episode as well, because I know that we've got Jackie here, Dan is here as well, Sarah, my assistant, is in the chat. Gloria Jean is here. So if anyone that's in the chat wants to ask questions, I can see them here and we can ask. But let's talk about Team Habits. What was the transition like from going from Start Finishing into Team Habits? What was the rationale in doing it, but also what did you notice when you made that shift into writing a book about like the team stuff?
Yeah, so for me, Team Habits was actually, so when I you know this, but for everybody to pull you into the conversation, but when I started writing Start Finishing, I knew it was part one of at least a 3-book arc.
Yeah.
Right. It was Start Finishing, and then the project name was Start Finishing Together. And that was how we do this work as a team. And then the third was Lead the Finish, which is what leaders need to do to actually help their teams finish more projects and not just add on to the heap and doing the swooping and pooping that leaders do. So for me, team habits was just a natural part of the conversation. I've been in this conversation since the beginning. It just happens that given the state of the blogosphere, what we now call the creator economy, right? It was entrepreneurs and solos that really valued the work that I was doing and amplified that. So it's more Start Finishing that got amplified.
Yeah.
Not that team habits and leadership stuff wasn't there. So for me, it was a really natural switch. It took people a little bit. It's like, wait a second, don't you do like the planners and the productivity and sort of things? It's like, actually, I'm about work, right?
Yeah.
In all of its context, I'm about work and how to make it happen. It just happens that there was an audience that we had built for solos or individuals doing their work. So after that, it actually, I think many people see that it's made my work more coherent than it was before, having team habits there, because it felt like, for some people, like the team and leadership stuff was kind of an offshoot or like a random weird thing. It was like, no, this is just a pillar of the table that now I brought out. And the reason you're seeing so many different books on teams is, again, COVID shook up a whole lot. So Team Habits published in 2023. And so you got to look at the time record, and COVID came and just threw all of our team habits and workways on the table or in the trash bin. And so we're really trying to figure out how to do teams right now. How do we team? And so that's why there's that bumper crop of all those books between David Allen, between me, between the Friction Project. There's just a lot of really great team books right now.
Do you think really quickly that with the push to get people out of remote and back into the same buildings, which I think the genie's out of the bottle. I think hybrid is
the default.
But the crazy thing is like there's almost like this trying to push it back to where it was, and there's no going back. You know what I mean?
Well,
I think there's a middle path.
How long of a conversation do we have, Mike?
We can go as long.
Here's what I will say about this.
Look, we can go as long as we want. As long as people want to stick around, we can go, and we can make this episode longer. But I think that
So how many people have already left?
No, I don't think anyone's left yet. But I think this idea of polar sides, right? Like this or that. The middle, like I think that needs to be addressed more than it is in a reasoned way.
Yeah. I mean, here's the default, or here's the reality. Hybrid is now the default.
Right.
It is the default. Now, I'm not saying, so let's be nuanced here, because that's what we get the chance to do here outside of the social media soundbite. I am not saying work from home or work from anywhere is the default. That is not true. Right. I am also not saying that co-located work experience, like in the office, is default. That's not true. But we are automatically in this place because we have technology that we take home with us. We check stuff on their phone. Like we've been hybrid for a long time. What's different is that we are acknowledging that we're hybrid, and there are many more workers who are like, you know what? I actually want to do more of my work during work time, which means all this extra digital work that I've been doing in my off unpaid time, I want to do that during the workday.
Sure.
That's one of the tensions that's happening.
Yep.
Second, if any leader pays attention to actual data about this, there has been no net negative change to productivity since we've gone more hybrid. Right. In fact, in most contexts, productivity has gone up. Right. And so most of the time when people are talking about RTOs, which is return to office, I'm like, before we talk about RTO, here, I want you to do one thing, leaders. One thing for me. Define the outputs of productivity. Just do that. What would the outputs of productivity actually look like? And then let us have a full conversation about the inputs to that might get us there. And you might find out where people work and how often they work there is not a reliable input to the actual output that you're looking for. But it is incredibly hard to specify outputs at that level. I've worked with high level companies, Fortune 100 companies that have tried this, and it almost always fails. So this whole RTO mandate about like, come back to the office, you're going to be more productive. And it's like, no, what's going to happen is you're going to feel like I'm working more.
Yeah. It's the TPS reports office space kind of stuff.
You're going to see me working and make the false inference that because you see me working during this time that I am in fact working. But let's get real, y'all. Mm-hmm. People are incredibly good at looking like they're working and not actually working.
I think about that scene in Avengers where Tony Stark goes looking around the room and they're on that big shield. Helicarrier goes, and that guy's playing Galaga.
Yeah, and that guy's playing Galaga.
Looking like he's working, but playing Galaga. Oh, no, totally.
Like, and so the more you try to coerce people, I know, whatever. The more you try to coerce people into working in a box, mm-hmm. the more that they will game what their experience is to make it look like they're working inside the box, just to piss you off.
Yeah.
Right. And just to win that game. The more you're like, look, I don't care where you work, except for like what we're doing in a lot of our clients and in a lot of our work. My actual advocacy here is let the work context to define how people should work. So it turns out there are some activities like whiteboarding and real good brainstorming sessions, which are dreadful to do digitally, that people will actually willfully drive to the office to do.
Yes.
Build that around that. If you've got real-time collaboration, if you're building tangible things in the world, if you're needing to mock, if you're needing to do all that, bring people to the office. And it turns out people understand that rationale. But please, 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 do not have people come to an office to sit in a desk, to put on headphones, to be on a friggin' Zoom meeting that they could have been doing the same thing from home. Makes no sense, right?
Yeah.
So I think the RTO mandates is just people wanting faster horses. But we live in a world of cars.
I also wonder if, and we could speak to this a little bit, if when remote work happened, it was because it was forced and thrust upon as opposed to a choice.
Choice by whom?
That's my point. The choice by the people who are in charge. Like they were told they had to do that. They didn't like that choice. They didn't like to be told what to do. Now there's agency again. They're like, well, we want that back. But again, genie out of the bottle. And you're right. To your point, what was what's the question you need to ask?
Well, and I get, because again, I'm an executive coach. I get there are plenty of folks who don't know how to lead a remote team. I understand that. I actually really do understand that. But let's be honest about what's going on, right? Instead of, I don't know how to lead a remote team, so therefore everybody should come back to the office. There's a different choice we can make. There's a different investment we can make of increasing your skills of how to lead a hybrid team in a modern workforce, right? Are you going to have to reskill? Yes. Are you going to have to upskill? Yes. You know what's easier to reskill and upskill? Like 5% of the company.
Yeah.
Not 90% of the company's got to reskill and upskill, because I think what I continue to beat my hand on the fist about is when you change work context to that degree, you are changing work skills. You are changing team habits. It's not just a simple do the thing you do here. That's not how this works, people. And so we're going through all this efforts to get people, some are going through all this effort to get people back into the office, only to realize I am having to reskill an entire workforce and they're not as productive in this transition. And if I would have just left them the hell alone and figured out how to tweak the ways that we were working based upon the context.
It's really no different than back when we were starting this, when all these apps came out, to have that one person that did everything by email. Generally an older person, that's what they grew up with. You're like, okay, you're the email, you work via email, we'll let you do that. You are that person. I mean, especially if they were in a higher role, right? Like if you were let them do that, because it's just way harder to get them to use like an Asana or a ClickUp or what have you. It's the same thing. It's just applied to a different context at this point.
Different context. And so again, I think And I think hopefully our listeners here will see the nuance here. I'm not saying that like everyone should work from home all the time and things like that. That's not
Yeah,
at
there's
all
no
what I'm saying.
absolutes here. There's no
There's no
absolutes.
absolutes here, but I am saying be more thoughtful about the inputs that lead to great team performance, and be more thoughtful about what great performance is and articulate that. Be very clear about that. And you will be surprised by how teams rally to achieve those goals once they're made meaningful, once they're made relevant, once they're made with a sense of respect out of the workforce, as opposed to just, you just got to, like, we're paying for rent, we're paying for these buildings that people aren't in, so you need to go work in the buildings.
Yeah.
That's called a sunk cost, buddy.
Yeah.
Right. The very same thing you're going to criticize someone for 2 weeks from now, someone on your team for. You're doing that right now. So again, people have different motivations for them, but most of the motivations that I've seen have not been actually data backed, and they haven't been really about the core outputs of productivity and performance.
Yeah.
They've been, we're paying for buildings, or, what's it look like if our people aren't working from there, or we don't know how to manage these people, or, those damn Zoomers don't wear pants, or whatever it is.
They're emotionally driven decisions and not driven by reason.
Correct.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, because I want to be respectful of your time and stuff, if anyone has any questions, and I know we're getting a comment, and I don't want to necessarily out the comment here because it may be just work related or what, but one of the members of our community is saying, like, one of the management team where they work has decided that the default is in the office, but you can schedule work from home, or work from home is for emergencies and so on. That is a palatable choice. That is a palatable, and then if you don't like that, well, then you can choose to go elsewhere. But at least that's being taken into account, which I think is important.
Yeah, to me, that still counts as hybrid.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that still counts as hybrid.
Yeah, absolutely, right? It does. Absolutely.
There's a broad, but really, this is the default. Love defaults. You can schedule time away for these reasons. That lets people have choice and autonomy and agency about that, and that's really what we're talking about here.
Jackie has a question about the app. And it's a technical question, but I'm sure that it's worth noting. Does the app sync with Apple's calendar yet? Is it syncing across with calendars and such? Is that something that the app does, or
Apple is? So the short answer is no. Right? It's in a roadmap to do that. It's a stickier problem than what it first comes across. So Jackie, thanks for that question. Currently, it's still only syncing with Google, but it is something we're working on.
But there are ways to get Apple and Google to talk to one another so that you can get it on your devices. Correct. It's just you have to jump through some of those hoops. They're not huge hoops to jump through, though. I mean,
no, they're not huge hoops to jump through. And anytime we've invoked that on the momentum side, like internally in the app, it's actually created more problems.
Yeah.
Right. And so I hate that I'm not sitting on, multiple, hundreds of millions of funding to solve that particular issue. But actually the best way is to get Google and Apple to sync. And if you get that going, then momentum syncs and it does the work.
It's kind of like what I do, what I've seen happen with things like Todoist or what have you, or even like my contacts, like Google Contacts, like all of that. I use iCloud, I use the Apple stuff, and yeah, they don't like to talk to each other, mainly because they want you to use their thing and their thing exclusively. So it is that kind of, tit for tat kind of thing that you have to you got to kind of play ball. And to your point, app development is hard. It's really hard because you've got people that want users that want like this, but it's not just as simple as, to your point, I want this button to do this thing. There's a lot of things that go into that, and engineering is not, back when I worked for we've talked about this before, the Next Web, and when I was working for Cult of Mac, I would have these questions, and once you get in it, you're like, okay, this is easier said than done.
I've eaten so much crow, bro. So much crow from having my own app, because I realized that, like, this may sound like commiseration, but so momentum works across all devices.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have native apps for every device, because if you really think about the implications of that, native means native Microsoft, native Apple. It means native iOS, which is different than native iOS pad or whatever they call that
Mac OS, which
Yeah,
is different than native Android, which is different than,
And so that's one of those things, a small team, limited budget, not funded by the big guys. It's like, I don't have the budget to code 9 different apps.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, what I love, you and I both love Apple products. Like but Apple is still a minority in the world. Like the Windows and the Androids are still the most prevalent. And so when you're dealing with that, it's why, OmniFocus stayed Mac only for so long and iOS only. It's why, you've got what's it called? Hey.com. They're like, when those guys were building stuff, it was Mac only for the longest time. Like, it's, again, nuanced.
And it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
It's actually gotten so much harder with the proliferation of devices because I was actually experiencing this earlier today as a user because I was stuck in one of those weird modes. This is such a productivity nerd thing to do, but luckily we're dork readers here and we can make it happen.
We can.
Where I was like, I wanted to use my phone, but my wrists were hurting and I wanted to use a keyboard, right? Because that's a thing that you can do.
Yeah.
Except for the phone, the way it was built for the phone implied two-handed use. And there was no real way to use a keyboard and the phone app at the same time because designers are getting so good about saying, what is the form factor and user experience of this? And I will build to that form factor. And so I had one of those experiences where I went to like 3 or 4 devices to try to find the form factor, but the keyboard that I needed to actually be able to like do what I was needing to do without paying, but still being able to focus. Right. So that's where we are in the world where it's like we are designing per device, which is fantastic on the customer side of things. Sometimes it's challenging on the developer side or on the owner side.
Before I let you go, I want to, this is a part which we'll cut out, obviously for the members only. These are the questions that I'm going to ask all the guests going forward. So those that are here watching this live.
And by the way, Mike, I'm not on a hurry. So
I figured, if you were, you would have let me know. I know how we roll, but we got these questions are going to be specifically, I think, interesting coming from you, considering that we've known each other for so long and we both have had evolutions in our kind of the way we approach this stuff over the years. So I think it's going to be interesting for a lot of people to hear, but how has your relationship with time evolved over the years? And can you think of any pivotal shifts that have helped you work with it more than facing the friction of time?
Yeah. So the core of my thinking about time has actually been much more on the energy management side of things and not the time management side of things.
Fair.
And so as I have aged and as I've seen us get even more fractured with our attention and energy, it's not that I'm time disassociated, but I see time as one of the least important factors for us to talk about. Or one of the lesser important factors to talk about, right? As far as our energy and our attention goes. And so I think that's been the biggest shift in that, like, when I think about time blocking, it's really energy blocking at this point.
Yeah.
And saying what's the energy that I'm going to have for that time or for that block and what are we doing? So that's, I think, been the biggest change is just reweighting the sort of time, energy, and attention variables and seeing that our energy and attention, my energy as a person who has aged and, is dealing with chronic stuff now is now much less. Right.
Yeah.
And I think over the last 15 years, the daily battle for our attention has gotten more intense.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting as we talk. I feel the same way. Like time, as you get, we live in this space, you and me. So it's like time, we have the least amount of agency and control over because it moves on whether we want it to or not. Energy, we don't have as much control over either because of but we can be aware of it and we can use time or our relationship with time to kind of go, okay, this is when I should, and we talked about this before, me being the night owl, you being the early riser, like how does that work? Attention, we do have agency over, but to your point, it's under constant barrage. And so time, we've been trying, like the people who've tried to quote manage time must understand at this point, especially as you get old, like it can't be managed. It can't be, right? So that is a fascinating, and I think a lot of people make that realization, as we make our way through time.
Yep. You can only really manage priorities and attention.
Yeah.
The rest, you can guide, you can
dance with. You just got to dance with.
But,
yeah.
So I would say that, and that's not to say that like, I mean, it's difficult because I have employees in my company and I can't be like, bill me for the energy of that day. Like that's not a thing. Right. I don't have a little wattage meter on them. So we still need to be in this construct. But I think when you really sit down to the things that matter to you most, you'll realize that time is not the vector, that it's not the sort of ingredient that probably you need to focus on the most.
And I think this dovetails nicely into the second question, which is what's a system, practice, or mindset shift that's had the biggest impact on your ability to finish meaningful work?
I mean, it's hard not to mention my own work on this one because it's literally, I eat my own cooking on that one, but just time blocking in the way that we do it and really using focus blocks well. So focus blocks being 90 to 120 minute blocks of time where you focus on doing your deep work and being as disciplined and boundaried and intentioned about those as I can. Mm-hmm. At the same time, like I'm looking at my weekly planning and there's a way I do it where I can count how many focus blocks I have for the week. Just being like, you know what? I had 8 theoretical ones. I'm only really planning to use 6 of them well. Right.
Yeah.
Because life will happen. Something will come up. And so not getting to that place to where it's like, oh, I made this super airtight plan that when life happens, I then stress out about. So not only did I not get the damn thing done, now I'm stressed about it. No one's better off for that, right? So plan for 6. And if it's a good, a good D18 or a good 18 on their D20 roll, then great. I get some bonus time. But if it's at 10, I'm all right.
What you need, one of the members of my community gifted me this. It's a D20 by Jason Fox. And if you take a look, it's all D20. Everything is a critical 20. My son.
So, Mike, we're going to get so fired here because if anyone's been listening to us for a while, it's like, how many Easter eggs are we going to drop in this mug?
Last question. Again, these all kind of are correlated and for a reason. If you'd strip down your productivity approach to one core principle, like you'd rely on it if everything else kind of disappeared, what would it be and why?
I'd probably have to go back to the 5 keys of, like, it's a mnemonic. So A, B, C, D. Mm-hmm. Intention, awareness, boundaries, courage, and discipline. Like if you're struggled with something, is figuring out which of those need to unlock the door, time aside, apps aside, tools aside. Is it you need to be more aware of yourself, or you need to set a better boundary, or you need to have more courage or discipline? Like somewhere in there will be the universal key.
All the qualitative stuff. That's the qualitative stuff leads to the quantitative stuff. I think it's such a tricky thing because especially when we think about terms, I've got this essay. I'll because this will be out by now, but about this whole idea of efficiency and this focus on it. And I'm like, I don't think the people that are trying to make things more efficient know what efficiency is. And it's unfortunate and borderline dangerous in a lot of ways. You know what I mean?
It's like hyper scheduling, hyper focus, like all those different types of tools that we see out there that are essentially focusing on efficiency and not effectiveness. And I'm going to go back to the old schools. I'm not the first person to say this, and I don't know that Stephen Covey was another one, but we need better compasses, people. Mm-hmm. We need better compasses, but so many people are not even talking about the map. They're just talking about how to scoot down a road a little bit faster.
Yeah.
right? And so that's where those 5 keys that I mentioned, that gives you a compass of figuring out how to orient yourself and get to where you're trying to go. But yeah, I think we need to switch paradigms. And unfortunately, we live in and I say this is weird because I have an app, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think we look at the tools and use paradigms of tools and technology and misapply them to the organic beings that we are.
What's the quote from Thoreau? Men have become the tools of their tools.
Correct. And so I would want us to take a step back. And this same principle is actually at work when you think about the fear that people have about AI and also the over optimism about it, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's not going to solve all of our problems, but it's also not going to create problems we haven't already created for ourselves.
Yep.
Right? It's just going to make both of those more efficient. But, what good is efficiency if you're running down the wrong road? And that is the fundamental question that we're going to have to continue to ask in this age of automation and AI and hyper apps and hyper efficiency is, am I going down the right road? And if I'm not, do I have the qualitative stuff, the courage, the discipline, the intentions, the awareness, the boundaries to stop, not slow down, but stop and make a hard pivot.
The slowing down is exactly what you just said, is the recognition. That's the slowing down. It's the stopping that you just mentioned. Yeah. Charlie, this has been great. Obviously, we've got the interview coming up that we had. It'll be interesting. And when I talked to Courtney about this, she was a couple episodes ago, listening back to that episode, it'll be interesting to hear because it's been how many years? 5 years since we chatted about this very stuff with Start Finishing. So where can people keep up with everything you got going on and the work that you're doing, and just that way they can get updates from you on the daily?
I am one of those weird internet dinosaurs that can be found in almost the same place that he started. So all roads lead to productiveflourishing.com. If you want to find me on LinkedIn, that's great. I'm sometimes there, but mainly I'm at Productive Flourishing, and you can see what we're doing there.
Charlie, thanks again for joining me for a productive conversation. And now I'm going to end the live stream, and then we'll circle back. Stick around, Charlie. We'll chat a little bit more. But thanks to everybody who was here on the live stream. Really appreciate all the premium members and such. This episode will be going live on February the 28th. So make sure you take a chance to listen to it. And this will also go live for people to be able to watch. So thanks so much for being here. We're going to wrap up the live stream now. Thanks again, Charlie. Really appreciate it. And by the way, Jackie, before we end the live stream, one of the reasons I wanted to do this as a live stream, Charlie, is Jackie is a big fan of your work.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for showing up.
So take care, everybody. We will see you later.